All right, that is Ed winning the match. Basically stole the trophy out of my hands.
Tore it out of your hands.
So there's a lot of confusion. I want to read some emails coming into our control. This one comes in from, hold on, this one comes in from Ollie. It says, tell Pete Hegseth that it says pride comes before the fall, so stop being boastful, prideful, and he may win. All right, this one comes in from Art. Says, the race was rigged. So there's a lot of confusion.
Yes.
There's a lot of confusion, a lot of, we're going to have a winner-take-all. A winner-take-all between Pete and Ed.
There are no backsies. No backsies.
Winner-take-all. Whoever wins this match right now is going to be the winner of this whole game, and they get the trophy.
I already got the trophy.
We ready?
Wait, is there a bell or what? How are we doing? Is there a bell?
Ready? Go.
That's a big one for me. That's faster.
So Pete is number 8. Ed is number 4.
Oh, come on.
Right now, Ed is slightly in the lead. Ed is the yellow. Pete is the gray.
Okay. Making a late surge.
This is really close.
Come on, I need it faster.
Oh! Come on!
I can't win.
Come on!
I can't win, Rick.
Who wants a picture? Who wants a picture? Come on! We got a birthday girl right here. All right.
My birthday's on Monday.
Head to foxandfriends.com for the After the Show show.
When it comes to this Bob Mueller probe, he has had it. Not the president, who's long called it a witch hunt. The federal judge who questions whether investigators are simply going too far. This on the same day we learn 2 of fired FBI Director James Comey's closest confidants are going, period. Meet the former Clinton pollster. That's right, Clinton pollster, who says, forget the investigation, it's the investigators who have some splaining to do. And you're looking live at the White House, where we are learning big things could be cooking. News on the fate of those American hostages, reportedly set to be released from North Korea, and the details as to where and when those big talks between the president and the leader of North Korea will happen. And speaking of the president, he is set to depart this hour for Cleveland, where he'll be talking up tax cuts and no doubt talking down Democrats. And yeah, a couple of Republicans who've been ripping those tax cuts. What's going on? And the man who just bought another 75 million shares of Apple, and he doesn't know how to use his iPhone. It's okay. It's okay. He does know how to make money. And no one has made more of it investing than Warren Buffett. We are live in Omaha, where Liz Clayton's got him and his take on the markets, the economy, and oh yeah, Donald Trump. And we're live in Dallas, where the National Rifle Association meeting is still going on, and protesters are still gathering. But they're not all protesters. I want you to meet this student who just staged a big school walkout to protect the Second Amendment. A busy 2 hours of Cavuto Live. Now. This was a scene moments ago in Moscow, where demonstrators have been gathering ahead of the inauguration for a 4th term of Vladimir Putin. They don't trust him. They don't like him. Better than 350 have been hauled off by police, and this could escalate here. This is a planned protest by the opposition movement, as it's called, and they're not very keen on Vladimir Putin's vice-like grip on that country. If anything happens, and there are updates on this, we will, of course, keep you posted. Meanwhile, back in this country, the president is set to hold a powwow with Cleveland business leaders, where he is talking about increasingly trying to get an idea how the tax cuts are happening. Marine One already leaving the White House now for that journey. The president is going to be talking up the fact that tax cuts have been the wind at this economy's back. Certainly the market's back. Even as some protesters have been saying quite the opposite. Now, that is coming mostly from Democrats, but this past week, Republicans like Marco Rubio. Kevin Corke is in Cleveland ahead of the president's visit there, and what kind of crowd he's gathering. Kevin.
Neil, good morning, my friend. As you can well imagine, we expect another rousing crowd here to greet the president, but let's be also fair about this. There is a great deal of concern, Neil, about exactly how the tax cuts will benefit or not small businesses around this country. Expect to hear the name Ohio Industrial Sales today. They gave $500 bonuses to their employees. The president will certainly spotlight that in his tax roundtable coming up today. In fact, he's got a pair of them. Meanwhile, another big story shaking Washington, Neil, is the story about the judge that you mentioned. Judge Ellis talking about the ongoing Mueller special probe into the president's so-called ties with Russia. Did he somehow, or did his campaign somehow get involved with the Russians to collude to win the 2016 election? Let me take you to just a quote which I just found stunning from the judge, again criticizing special counsel Mueller's team. He said, "You don't really care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud. What you really care about is what information Mr. Manafort could give you that would reflect on Mr. Trump or lead to his prosecution or impeachment." Come on, man. That was Judge T.S. Ellis. Now, he's talking about Paul Manafort, of course, a former Trump campaign official who's run into quite a bit of trouble, most notably because of bank circumstances and perhaps even some tax problems. But again, that's all being worked out as that case continues to wind its way through the courts. The president has long said that his campaign had nothing to do with Russia, and this is all a ruse through Manafort and others to get to him. Now, yesterday, Neil, in Dallas, Texas, big NRA rally, a rousing standing ovation for the president's speech. Same for Vice President Mike Pence, both of them knocking it out of the park, talking not just about faith and freedom and the First Amendment and the Second Amendment, that is, but they were also talking about the fact that this administration has had its share of fights, and the president, for one, says he loves it.
None of that information has to do with information related to the Russian government coordination and the campaign of Donald Trump. How does this have anything to do with the campaign, the judge asked. Let me tell you, folks, we're all fighting battles, but I love fighting these battles. It's really a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace.
There's just a bit of that crowd. Wow, it was something, Neil. Meanwhile, I wanted to pass this along. I think you'll find this interesting. Lisa Page, whose electronic communications with another FBI employee drew accusations of political bias. Well, she resigned on Friday to, quote, pursue other opportunities. Same story for Jim Baker, the former FBI top lawyer who was linked in 2017 to that journalist in the Trump dossier. He is also out at the Bureau. I should also pass this along, my friend. This is not the first time that we've seen the president conduct a tax roundtable like this. But what is different in this particular circumstance, Neil, or so we expect, is the president will really focus on the benefits for small business. We'll see how that all pans out. But for now, my friend, back to you from the beautiful city of Cleveland, Ohio, where the Cavs play tonight. So you can well imagine they're more interested in basketball, perhaps, than the president's visit.
Yeah, I would imagine. That's a battle for attention there. All right, Kevin, thank you very, very much. By the way, on the last time, your screen, Marine One, getting ready. Joint Base Andrews, the president, is going to Cleveland, and he will spell out a lot of this tax cut stuff that Kevin outlined here. This time stressing on small and medium-sized businesses. The focus tends to be on those big companies that got these big tax breaks, but a couple of these businesses have handed out $500 bonuses to workers to illustrate the point that it went much deeper than just some of the big Fortune 500 companies. Now, you heard a lot of talk back and forth about this judge. He is presiding over this Paul Manafort trial, where they're trying to understand how Mueller's expanding probe would justify some of the information that they want to get from Paul Manafort, the former campaign chairman for Donald Trump. Now, Manafort's people are urging all these charges to be dropped. Now, there's no hint that the judge will do that. He could drop a good many of the charges, but he did say that this investigation has gone far and wide and potentially further and wider than was the initial intent. This would not be the first investigation on the case of a prosecutor to do so, but let's get the read from former Clinton strategist Mark Penn, I apologize, and attorney Mercedes Cohen. Mercedes, the big thing here seems to be whether this investigation has run too far afield. And this judge is the first to say, I think it has.
It's pretty extraordinary. I mean, this is what happens when you have a judge that has a lifelong appointment. There are no constituents. There's no voting process. This is someone who's put in process, who's a judge for life. So he is very open, and it's pretty extraordinary to hear a judge say, wait a minute, what is going on here? If it quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. Don't play bait and switch. Don't violate due process. Call it like it is. If they
and
are
stay focused, right? I mean, that was one of the things the president was reminding people yesterday as he hopped aboard Air Force One to go to Cleveland here. He was telling this audience at the NRA yesterday, hey, this is out of control. This is a witch hunt.
I mean, part of it, and for a judge to go that far and say that, it really speaks volumes.
The judge didn't call it a witch hunt, but again, the view. Mark Penn, former Clinton pollster, when I noticed and got your remarks on this, you two said that part of this includes reviewing what the investigators are doing. What did you mean by that?
Well, I spent a year working with President Clinton fighting Ken Starr, and I wish at the time more Republicans had joined that. And I think today we need more objective, bipartisan review of what these investigators are doing, how they got there, how this started. Was this really all the fruits of a poisonous tree? What was he thinking when he put together a group of Democratic contributors as his lead prosecutors, and how that would appear fair and unbiased? What were Mueller and Rosenstein thinking when they went in to try to get Mueller made the FBI director, and then the next day he's made independent counsel? What were they thinking with these public raids that obviously signal to the press that you're investigating people rather than keeping that secret? I mean, there's so many conflicts here that are obvious, and this judge is the first person who didn't have his house rousted, with people with guns. He's the first person, who wasn't called an extortionist by Rosenstein, as Congress was. He's the first person who wasn't called obstruction of justice, as the president has been. He's the first person who could actually look at this and begin to object.
But what you're saying, just to be clear, Mark, is you said they should have stepped back and seen, all right, we have a disproportionate number of Democrats weighing in on that. Not a one had kind things to say about Donald Trump. And normally they don't let their personal opinions get in the way. But when they're all of those personal opinions, as we've later come to believe, it kind of was a stacked deck. But I'm wondering, would that make at least Mueller now in this stage be all the more scrupulous about what he's doing? Or do you fear that it's too late?
Well, you don't see that. When the Strzok and Page text messages were discovered, he had to not only, I think, fire them rather than reassign them and let them quietly quit when the Inspector General is going to come out with a report, right? He needed to destroy everything that they gathered, because that's the fruits of a poisonous tree. They were investigators who had extreme animus and bias, and whose texts reveal that they were more about getting the president than they were about doing an objective investigation, which is why they were quickly removed. I mean, there were so many things obvious
you raise
here.
A lot of legitimate questions. Mercedes, and you're a top-notch lawyer in your own right. I always look at this and say, all right, when you're using these kind of tactics, raiding someone's home, in case of Manafort's early in the morning, waking everybody up, going into Michael Cohen's offices and home to do the same, monitoring his calls, these are, what you do with the mob kind of tactics. And someone approved these moves each and every time. To what end?
I mean, those are extreme measures, what you're talking about. All the things that were done in this investigation have been extreme. I mean, we talked about how they gathered the phone calls. Initially, there was reporting that there was wiretapping, which is even greater scrutiny. But all of this, it really boils down to, let's look at what the outcome is going to be. Is there really a crime? You have come forward, back and forth.
To do this,
you have to show probable cause.
And if it was granted to you, what would allow someone to grant you that authority? You were telling them you're afraid something is going to be destroyed, documents are going to be taken, what?
Exactly. Documents are going to be destroyed, witnesses are going to be influenced, evidence is going to be somehow destroyed. Text messages, there's so much that can be removed, destroyed, that can really affect the outcome of your investigation. So you have to show that, but you have to show some probable cause to go continuing down this process and show that there is a crime that we're investigating. And what Judge Ellis said is like, what are we doing here? If this is what you're going to, there's a lot of back channel communication. When any defense attorney will tell you, when your client's in the thick of a federal investigation, there's a lot of back channel communication, because they don't necessarily want your client, they want the bigger fish. So in other words,
they're leveraging off one individual. And Mark, I think that was part of your point here, that this has gone far afield, as it did with the Clinton investigation that started over real estate deals, what have you, and then veered into a relationship with an intern. Are you saying then kind of the same thing happening here? Stop these type of investigations, stop how we go about them, limit how their purview, what?
Absolutely. It's 1998 all over again. We're now into non-disclosure payments to a porn star, things that normally, frankly, would be an administrative process. The last time I looked back, the FEC for a $200,000 illegal contribution, it was a $34,000 fine. I mean, it's crazy what's this process that's been started. And we thought we got rid of all this. We thought we got rid of the independent counsel statute. And through this fluke of Sessions recusing himself and then the New York attorney recusing himself, Rosenstein has been able to form a government within the government, unaccountable until this judge spoke up to no one. And that is the loophole here that has to be closed in the future.
All right. Guys, I want to thank you both very, very much, and we'll see what this judge decides. Remember, the Manafort folks are saying just drop the whole thing, all charges. Don't know if he's going to do that, but he could drop a lot of the charges. We have a lot more coming up on Cavuto Live here, including the latest on North Korea. You know, they've been putting on the charm offensive here, and yet this is the same guy who, you know, a couple of months ago was lobbing missiles. It kind of reminded me of the Twilight Zone cookbook episode, To Serve Man. Are we all being hoodwinked by just a big-headed alien? I'll explain, because that was one of my favorite Twilight Zone episodes. Some of you are too young. All right, you know, in a couple of days, Vladimir Putin is going to be sworn in as leader of Russia. This would be the fourth time that has happened, not back-to-back-to-back. But ahead of that, not everyone is hunky-dory on this. They've got police lined up and sort of marshaled out throughout the greater Moscow. A number of protesters have already been arrested, better than 350, we're told. These are planned protests from the opposition party saying it's not fair, it's not right, and it's not very democratic. The bottom line is that it continues. So we'll keep an eye on that. Also keeping an eye on Hawaii, on high alert right now, spewing lava, strong earthquakes from a volcano, generated by a volcano. 1,700 people have had to flee their homes there. They had a false, remember that false ballistic missile alert some months back? So you can understand they're on tenterhooks there. They worry about it. It's caused, obviously, safety fears to be sort of re-examined here amid the back and forth with the North Koreans. Remember, it was the fear that a North Korean missile was hurtling toward them that first prompted that false warning from the government to sort of batten down the hatches. Now, that was then very different environment. Right now, we are looking forward to those talks between the president and the North Korean leader, as well as some promising developments on the release of American hostages held there. 3 of them. There might be more down the road. The president has yet to set a date and a location for that. He says he knows it. We'll share it soon with everybody. The former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. So much more. Bill Richardson. Ambassador, good to have you. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Neil.
Who knows better than negotiating with the North Koreans? You served that role back during the Clinton administration. I think you presciently has said you have to be careful verifying everything you hear out of them. You dealt with Kim Jong-un's father, but this goes back to his grandfather as well, that they say one thing, do another. So if you were to advise the president's people talking to Kim Jong-un now, what would you tell them?
I would say to watch out, that he's probably got something up his sleeve, like right before a big negotiation, like what's going to happen with a summit. The North Koreans do a charm offensive. They put out good press statements. This is what we're going to do. We're going to close down a nuclear facility. They probably leaked that they're going to release the 3 Americans before the summit. You got to watch them, and you got to be very conscious of the details. My worry, Neil, is the president goes into the summit, and unless we have a strategy of where we want to end up, you know, these guys are very skillful. They're relentless. They don't think like us. They're not into quid pro quos. They think they're totally right. The divine right of the father, the grandfather, as you mentioned, and now Kim Jong-un.
All right. Now, it seems that the president was favoring talks in the demilitarized zone, that it's easier. It's probably better optics. He didn't say that, but that seems to be the view. Do you agree with that?
No, you know why, Neil? I've been to that area. The way you make deals with the North Koreans is informally. You know, like I heard that maybe there's going to be a dinner, or they're going to walk together and talk, get to know each other. You know, that area is too compressed. You make deals with the North Koreans in informal settings. In the formal settings, table to table, you know, they're going to vent, will vent, back and forth. So
you like proof. We were showing the time that you helped rescue an American prisoner there. But you were big on saying, I need to see it before I could talk about it. The same would apply now, I guess, to the release of these hostages and any agreement. The president has already said he'll walk away from the table if it doesn't look promising. By that, he means whether the North Koreans are going to agree to something firm and commit to our checking what they're promising, right?
Well, I'm not a big fan of the president's tweets and announcing they're going to be released soon. They haven't been released. The North Koreans are going to decide when the prisoners are released, and I worry about saying, well, I'll walk out. The North Koreans are very prickly. They're very sensitive. Doesn't mean they don't deserve that scrutiny. But I just wish traditional diplomacy would govern the president's style, but it's not going to...
Look how far it's taken us. This unconventional approach, say what you will of it, has got us this far where the two leaders could be talking. Right?
Well, things are going well. The South Korean summit, the Olympics, now this summit. Look, I've said the president deserves credit for meeting Kim Jong-un, agreeing, sending Pompeo. I'm hopeful. It's the best I've seen in a long time, but I worry because I know the North Koreans.
All right, Ambassador, thanks for taking the time. All right, our A-team, economic A-team, Avenger team, back from China. Nothing to show for it. Uh-oh.
You just had the trade contingent come back from China. Are we in a trade war with them?
Well, we're in a trade skirmish with them. And it's important that it doesn't turn into a trade war. I think, frankly, both sides are smart enough to know that a trade war would be bad for each of them and bad for the rest of the world.
All right, Warren Buffett. No one has made more investing than Warren Buffett in human history. It's a simple fact. And so his thoughts, weighing in on developments in the world, bear monitoring and watching. Liz Clayman is out within Omaha for the big powwow there. Well, a lot more from her coming up and a lot more from Warren Buffett coming up and his thoughts on the world in these Chinese talks, the back and forth, which seems to imply that it's not a war in his eyes, more like a skirmish. But skirmishes can get out of control, too. And doesn't Fox News contributor Jonas Max Ferris know it? Kind of worries about it. He's just saying, maybe cooler heads prevail. But our economic Avenger dream team came back, our Avengers, and they didn't have anything. They came back empty-handed. What do you think?
It seemed like an agree to not agree meeting, which at this point is good. It could have gotten worse. It's not solved. The Chinese not going to magically make a $200 billion trade deficit just disappear. Or
they disagreed, right? They didn't want to set an arbitrary number to pair that surplus by a set amount, right? Right off the bat.
No, and you really can't. I mean, what would happen, ideally, they would stop doing certain things, and that in itself would make the problem go away. You can't really target that gap. And, realistically, they would have to buy more stuff. And I don't know if that's going to happen. Our stuff's expensive relative.
But what about stop gouging us? The president's view is then remove the tariffs you put on our vehicles that come into your country or whatever. We charge 2.5%. The president say charge in excess of 20%. Just stop that. That would be a big difference. They
definitely get away. It's not like this is a baseless argument with it. I mean, he did pick the one country where Trump has a kind of a strange view on trade that goes back to Japan, but it is right with China. China gets. I say he's brought that to light. Whether you think the tariffs are the answer, it's brought people. They do kind of cheat. Governments have let them get away with it in the same way that like tech companies have. There's no place that could get away with telling a tech company, no, you have to do this, you have to give us this, you have to do that. Other than China, because everybody wants in on China. And governments are the same way. They want the cheap stuff. Their companies here need the cheap materials. We wanted this. We wanted to. So we let them get away with. They have more power than you than they should because everyone's hooked on China, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And so Trump, in some ways, is the only country that's willing to take them on because most tech companies.
And by the way, he's secretly egged on by European, countries that kind of agree but don't want to step out there and be publicly saying that.
Right. Nobody wants to. You almost need to have like an OPEC to counter China because nobody wants to be the country that isn't working with China.
So what's going to happen?
It depends. It could just stay bluster and talk for years with minor skirmishes. It could definitely turn.
But the longer it goes on, the more those tariffs pile up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's only had minimal effects to certain areas, farming and metals markets mostly. It hasn't gotten to where there's just wholesale tariffs. And it could do that, and it could do that for
but haven't the Chinese stopped buying American soybeans already?
Yeah, but they don't buy that much stuff. That's one of the reasons why this isn't such a threat. That said, you know, there's not a 40% tariff on iPhones yet either there too. So we don't know how it could go further, no question about it. And they're trying to be tough. They don't want to just buckle quickly because it would look like we could get away with anything and negotiate anything. So they're going to try to play it tough and use their power mostly in us wanting to buy stuff from them and all that. We haven't even gotten into some of the other things they get away with. You know, there's environmental issues, that stuff's being made there. It's not just because it's cheaper, it's because they're skirting rules that are here, whether it's, you know, healthcare, with all these costs to do business here, pollution, healthcare.
But are you surprised? I know they officially said, oh, we weren't expecting anything, but we sent our Avengers there. These are all our top economic guys, led by Mnuchin and everyone else. I guess he was sort of like our Captain America. And nothing. They come back with nothing.
We don't know what they're going to do because they didn't get anything. We might lay on more tariffs in a few days. I will say the stronger our economy gets, the better position we are in to start trouble with them. Because it's going to be, look, as Buffett said, it's not good for the economy to start to have a trade war. But if you're in a very strong position, you can handle trouble with China. If we were in a weak economy a few years ago, if it was a recession, you can't start any problem. They're in a more powerful position. We need the cheap goods. Right now, inflation's still under control. The economy's strong. It's like you can be pushy with this country. So maybe if it's going to happen, it would probably happen this year, where we would have hopefully a short tariff trade war.
Right.
Yeah, but it could spiral out of control. And then we have elections coming up, so maybe no one wants to do anything till then.
All right. You're our Avenger. I don't know which one.
They asked me to go. I was like,
Neil, to be the Hulk.
I got to be here on the show. There you go.
All right. Thank you very much, my friend. In the meantime, did you see this? NASA launching its first mission to Mars in over 6 years. This one is going to explore actually some of the mysteries inside the planet. You know, they seem to be determined to find life on Mars. This one's going to look at stuff inside, maybe hints of water. I don't know. But we'll know in the fall when it arrives. Still takes a long time to get there. When it does, these guys are not going to give up until they find life. I know that's not its goal, but it looks like it. After this. Welcome back. I'm Neil Cavuto, and you are watching Cavuto Live. Just an update. The President of the United States is heading out to Cleveland right now. Ostensibly, the purpose is to tout the tax cuts that he says are benefiting. It's not just the big old companies that are benefiting here. You remember that was an attack line on the part of Democrats this week. Even Marco Rubio bemoaning what he says is something that was disproportionately weighted against individuals, that if he had his druthers, it would help individuals a lot more. But tax cuts are an elixir that the Republicans are known for. For example, in the state of New Jersey, over the last 8 years, Chris Christie was famous for countering any tax hike that came along. I think he vetoed close to 400 such efforts on the part of Democrats to hike taxes. Oftentimes those were on the rich folks in the state of New Jersey. But there is a new sheriff in town, Phil Murphy, the new Democratic governor. Democrats control all branches of government in the Garden State. This guy heads one of them, the Senate president, and the Democratic state senator, Steve Sweeney. Senator, very good to have you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
You have sort of gone against the grain, or at least Governor Murphy's push to slap a tax on millionaires. It wouldn't be exclusively millionaires, but the very well-to-do in your state. Why?
Well, you know, with the federal tax cuts, it actually was a tax increase in New Jersey, and it's just not the direction we need to go in any further in New Jersey. New Jersey needs to stop talking about taxing. We really need to start talking about fixing New Jersey. You know, we're a high-tax state, and we have our issues, and it's time that we actually tackle, you know, really dig in and tackle some of the problems that we have.
Senator, unless I'm missing something, the governor hasn't changed his mind. Others who support him haven't changed their mind. They still want to go through with this surtax on the wealthy. So where does this stand? What has the governor told you?
Well, listen, give the governor credit. He's never wavered from the position he stands on. That he's taken since the campaign. The difference is circumstances have changed, and when circumstances change, if you don't change with them, you're foolish. We're in a situation where this state is in trouble, and again, I'm not calling the governor foolish. I'm saying as us as people, we have to recognize that just taxing and going out after trying to find more revenue to fix the problem you never fix the problem. We have structural problems that need to be addressed in New Jersey, and there's not enough taxes in the world to fix it. So it's time, Neil. It's time to have a real discussion with the people in New Jersey on the changes that need to be made in order to shrink the cost of government rather than just looking for ways to find money. Look, we've cut taxes. You know, we cut the estate tax. The Democrats did that, Neil. The Democrats were proud to do that. We raised the threshold on retirement income taxes so that in a couple more years, 90% of our retirees won't be paying taxes. During the Christie administration, we cut business taxes by $540 million. You know, most importantly, though, we have to recognize that New Jersey has an image problem. It's a tax problem. I had a situation the other day. I was talking to a woman who didn't know who I was, and she said to me, we're just small talking. I said, how are you doing? She says, got one more year, and I can't wait to get the hell out of here. I spent my whole life in New Jersey. My kids moved out. They won't come back. Neil, I'm hearing this over and over again, and as someone who's born and raised in New Jersey and thinks it's the greatest state in the nation, I love the place. You know, obviously we have a problem when our citizens are saying they can't wait to get the hell out.
I'm shocked by that, the fact that she didn't know who you were. You know what I'm wondering, Senator, is where this goes, though. I know the argument has been every time a governor or congressman or woman, you know, is proposing increasing taxes on the wealthy in this case, the argument is, yeah, they put up a stink, but where else are they going to go? Now, we know in some of these other high tax states like California, they go to places like Texas or lower cost environments like Florida, what have you. Are you worried about an exodus like that? Because I always think, I'm a New Jersey resident, I should disclose, that if you have kids and you're in the state or whatever, no matter what economic group you fall into, you're less inclined to bolt no matter the tax situation. Once that ends, you're very inclined to go. And that's what you have to worry about. What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I'm very concerned about. It's not just the wealthy. I'm telling you, the woman I spoke to the other day, I'm hearing this in the gym early in the morning. You know, people saying, as soon as I can get out of here, I'm getting out of here. That's not a state that we want to live in. You know, New Jersey's got so many wonderful attributes to it that, you know, when people keep saying they want to get out and you realize they're all talking about the same thing, the cost, the affordability, we have to start thinking about what are we doing? Because, you know, Einstein said it the best, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different outcomes, insanity. Just raising taxes on a regular basis is not going to make sense here. And Neil, I sponsored the millionaire's tax before. But you know something? It's not right now. It's nothing against the administration. It's the worst thing we should be talking about right now.
But he hasn't changed his mind.
He hasn't, but neither have I.
Okay, well, there is that. All right, Senator, thank you very much. We'll see how that goes. Again, keep in mind, New Jersey is not alone here. There are at least 7 other states that are proposing this sort of thing. Countless municipalities, including here in New York City, where Mayor Bill de Blasio is pushing a surtax on the well-to-do as a way to pay for things like education, teachers, salaries, and all the rest. So far, falling on deaf ears, but that doesn't mean it ain't going to be done. It is still a trend, and they oftentimes will take the federal tax cut and use that as a reason and a rationale to argue that average folks need a break. So you stick it to those who are above average when it comes to income. We shall see. All right, in the meantime, one of those who's sort of above average, as in one of the richest on the planet, and when it comes to investing, no one has made more money ever in the history of the planet. That's Warren Buffett with Liz Claman. He has an interesting read on this tax stuff, the economic stuff, the market stuff, the Korea situation, you name it. And when someone who bets the amount of money that he does on a lot of the stuff he says, you want to pay attention. Pay attention. He's next.
I don't think so, but nobody's putting proposition.
You bought a huge part of Apple. That's technology.
It's a consumer good. It's a consumer good. A bicycle is technology. I actually have one. A very nice shareholder about 2 months ago said, "This is pathetic," referring to me, and sent me a 10, and even explained how to use it. But unfortunately, he wrote it so that a 3-year-old could understand it, and I'm not quite there yet.
So you don't know how to use the iPhone yet?
Just not a 10.
Frankly, no.
But he does know how to invest in the company that makes it. In fact, buying 75 million shares in the latest quarter, that's something that Our Liz Klayman found out she has been with the man they call the Oracle of Omaha, the sage, you name it, Warren Buffett, the world's richest investor. Liz, that was very funny, but it tells you about the fact that even he can change his mind. Used to eschew technology altogether because he didn't understand it, but he understands making money, right?
That's all he wants to understand, and that's why his stock went from just a couple of bucks 50 years ago to more than $300,000 a share now, Neil. I mean, yes, the Apple news was certainly very big. I just got a good 25 minutes with Warren Buffett on a whole host of issues here at what is the largest shareholder meeting in the world. You can see behind me, it looks a little empty because he just took the stage with Charlie Munger, his vice chair. But what you have here on the exhibition floor in Omaha, Nebraska are the 61 or so businesses he owns selling wares because he wants to make money even during a shareholder meeting. Let me quickly tell you, Neil, I got him on tax cuts and the corporate tax cut. He said as he stood right by the Burlington Northern display, yes, he owns an entire railroad, that the tax cut for corporations has been a boon, and certainly for most, if not all of his 61 businesses. And then Matt Rose, who runs the railroad, you know, he's seen the cargo go in and out, Neil, and he said 18 out of his 22 cargo businesses are up markedly. That is highly unusual. And he said, I believe that we haven't even begun to see the beginning, even the real beginning of how positive the corporate tax cuts can be. A couple of things. He said he sees inflation coming in the last 2 months. Warren Buffett telling Fox Business that he has seen more signs of inflation popping up. Specifically, he's got a couple of companies that use a lot of steel. He's got Precision Steel, not to mention Precision cast parts, which makes all kinds of automotive and aerospace parts. He said the prices are absolutely spiking. Some of his businesses will in turn have to hike their prices. That's playing out inflation. He says he hasn't seen inflation like this in quite some time, but he said it started about 2 months ago. That, of course, might coincide with President Trump bringing up the tariffs. So I asked him, are we in a tariff war with China? And he said, it's a tariff skirmish, not a war just yet. And I believe, meaning Warren Buffett, that both sides, Neil, he said both sides are smart enough to realize that would be a big mistake. So I'm talking about all kinds of issues with him. Even, Neil, I even brought up Bitcoin because 5 years ago, his vice chair, Charlie Munger, I asked him what he thought of Bitcoin 5 years ago when it was $100 or so. Charlie said it was rat poison, his quote. Today I asked Warren, 5 years later, it's worth $9,000. Is it still rat poison? He said rat poison squared. Something tells me he's going to talk about that and much more in this meeting that has drawn the record crowd of all time, 42,000 people.
Incredible. Well, no one gets more out of than you do, Liz. Look forward to it. Liz Klayman, with the world's most successful investor. Others have come nowhere close, but he is his own cottage industry and just churning it out. And groupies by, as she said, the thousands. So catch her reports on all of this. In the meantime, if what Warren Buffett is saying is true, I have no reason to doubt that it isn't. But what does that say about the economy? What does that say about the president's ongoing push to recognize how tax cuts have helped the economy? So in a way, as a guy who wasn't an early backer or a big believer in Donald Trump, actually saying that the economy that is sort of generated and taken off with him as president is looking good for everybody, Democrat and Republican alike. Answer this.